Joining us now is Elaine Parker. Elaine is the senior spokesperson for Job Creators Network, Vice President of Communications. She's also the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation. And the Job Creators Network Foundation, of which Elaine is the president of, and their patient advocacy groups have unveiled a healthcare for you reform framework today. I'm the first one to get it, so I'm special. Thank you, Elaine, with that breaking on my show. But here's Little Job Creators Network trying to do something John McCain couldn't do, the Republicans couldn't do, the Democrats couldn't do, Obama couldn't do. Nobody could do it. Romney couldn't do it. Nobody could do it, which is come up with an alternative health care plan for the United States that everybody could buy into that made sense. Remember repeal and replace? Well, there was never a replacement. If they had this, you would have maybe gotten one. Elaine Parker, Job Creators Network Foundation, great to have you with us.
Good morning, John. Thanks for having me.
Walk us through your plan. First of all, how it came to be, and then let's go through the specifics of it. May we do it that way?
Absolutely. We're really excited to launch this morning. It's Healthcare for You, and your listeners can go to healthcareforyou.com and take a look at the website and some of the specifics around the framework that we've developed. And what's important is that we've developed a framework for healthcare reform, and we've done it with the right inputs. It's the input from the American people. And what they're telling us is that they want to repair, restore, and improve the patient-doctor relationship. They want to get the D.C. bureaucrats and politicians out of the exam room and out of the decision-making process for their health care. And they want to increase choice so that prices and costs come down for health care because they are out of this world. And the research that we've done in working with these patient advocacy groups is the largest ever proprietary study done among American voters. We have the input from more than 25,000 patients, doctors, and small business owners about what they want and what they need in a healthcare plan.
So, look, when you say you've gotten input from so many people, and this is what they need, why couldn't the government do this? Why couldn't the Republicans do this? Why did it take the Job Creators Network Foundation to get this done?
That's a great question, John, because Washington doesn't talk to the American people about what they want. Think about when Obamacare was being developed and passed and literally shoved down the American people's throats.
Right.
A bunch of lobbyists and bureaucrats and politicians went into back rooms and they passed Obamacare in the dead of night. And They said, we have to pass it so we can find out what's in it. We're turning Washington on its head. We're doing it very different because we are going to the American people and we're asking them what they want. There's no study that's ever been done of this size to find out what the American people really want. This is very, very sophisticated market research. And we've developed a product, a plan, a framework, whatever you want to call it. And we are going to turn it over to the legislators in Washington, D.C. so that they can write the legislation to make happen what the American people want this time. And that was one of the biggest problems with Obamacare, is it was about legislators and a group of people who were being deemed winners instead of what the American people needed.
Okay, so what you've done is develop a plan with everybody's input, doctors, patients, people, just average people, at what they want, and now you want to turn it over to Congress and get them to write legislation that would adopt this plan, which you're calling Healthcare for You. You say there's 7 elements of the Healthcare for You framework, and by the way, folks, we're with Elaine Parker. Elaine is the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation, and her organization has come up with a healthcare plan for America. This is pretty amazing, called Healthcare for You, and you can get more information. Go to healthcareforyou.com. That's healthcareforyou.com. There's 7 elements. Let's go through them. Remember, we're on radio in the morning, so we don't like to do policy wonkery, but let's try to go through these. Number 1, removing barriers that separate doctors and patients. What does that mean?
Sure. Well, let me back up for just a second, because what this is not wonkery, and it's not policy. This is a framework for healthcare reform. The wonks in D.C. can write the legislation. We built the product based on the American people's input. And removing barriers that separate doctors and patients is one of the biggest elements that our research came back with, is that patients want to restore that doctor-patient relationship. It's just been decimated under Obamacare, and the reality is a Medicare for all will absolutely blow it up. If we can remove that, any system that's as complex as our healthcare system, the more complex it is, the more expensive it is, and the farther away it puts patients and doctors from being empowered to make decisions for the patient's healthcare. For instance, we need to relax Obamacare's electronic health record regulations that requires doctors to actually spend half their time on paperwork and puts a literal and figurative screen between them and their patients. I mean, think about it. When you go to the doctor, John, how much do you actually see the front of your doctor? You see your doctor's back because they're working on the computer on the paperwork.
Right. So, all right, so you want to remove the barriers. Okay, that makes sense.
One other point, John. The regulations in Obamacare are literally driving physicians out of private practice. This is a little-known fact by the public, but 53% of doctors are now what we call payroll physicians, and they're employed by hospitals. So think about that. Their allegiance is actually to their employer, not to their patients. They're unable to actually advocate for their patients. And we need to change that so that doctors are in a position where they can advocate for their patients and advocate for the care that their patients need, instead of bureaucrats deciding what patients need.
You know what? I hadn't really thought of that, but I'm just thinking about several doctors I know for a fact that now work for hospitals. Like, they get a paycheck. They don't have their own practice. And they reverted to an employee rather than a business owner, right? Because a lot of doctors own their own businesses. They own a clinic or whatever. But I'm thinking there's probably 3 or 4 I know right now that in the last decade have changed from a self-sole doctor practitioner to working for a hospital and getting a paycheck. Quite different.
Think about the credibility that these physicians that we're working with bring to the table.
Right.
Because they're on the front lines dealing with Obamacare and trying to advocate for their patients and do the right thing by their patients. But they're also small business owners.
Right.
And so from a small business owner perspective, they're dealing with regulations of Obamacare to actually try to provide benefits to their own employees and navigate that system. There's nobody who's on the front lines more than physicians right now.
Right.
And these physicians that we spoke with are they're frightened of a Medicare for all system. I mean, they want to speak out about this, and they weren't able to during the Obamacare fight.
Well, the Medicare for all situation puts many of them out of business. I mean, they're not going to continue. You're going to get a ton of retirements because they can't make any money. Because if you look at Bernie's plan, which I think John Delaney pointed out, everybody has to take the Medicare pay down, right, which is about 65%. So everybody's got to take that for 100% of the care, which, A, is going to put a bunch of hospitals out of business immediately, especially those in non-urban areas or non-suburban areas, in rural areas. And secondly, tons of doctors are going to retire because they can't make any money. The whole thing is asinine. All right, let's get to number 2, insurance, lowering insurance premiums. Okay, how are you going to do that?
So think about it, John. We need to increase choice in the insurance industry. And a Medicare for all plan, guess what that's going to do? Decrease choice. One choice, government run. In every single industry where we inject competition and price transparency, we see prices come down and innovation increase. The healthcare industry is absolutely no exception to this economic fact. I mean, think about like LASIK surgery, okay? It's not covered by insurance, but it is a medical procedure. And so we have doctors that are competing for consumer or patient dollars. And the procedure was actually approved in 2000. Hard to believe it's been almost 20 years. But in those 19, 20 years, the prices come down 50%, and the procedure's only gotten better. Mm-hmm. And that's because we have competition and price transparency where patients can seek out the best care for their best healthcare dollars. So empowering patients with their own healthcare dollars and increasing choice and competition is a great way to bring down the cost of insurance. In addition, we've got some state and federal regulatory and state laws that we can pass to allow buying across state lines and some of those regulatory changes and legislative changes that need to be made.
So you wanted to become the Geico or the Progressive companies of car insurance for health insurance, right? I mean, when I was a kid growing up in New Jersey, I believe when I first started to drive, you had to get insurance. You had to get insurance to drive, right? I do remember that. And you had to buy it through a New Jersey firm. This is, I mean, I'm going back to the early 70s when I was a young man. But there was no Geico or Progressive or whatever these companies are. I mean, you had to go to your local agent, and you had 2 or 3 plans. And I remember my father signing it and giving me a check, and that was it. You had no choice. It was either that or you don't drive. So you want to open it up. I think everybody agrees with that. And now, what about telemedicine? Does that come into play here?
Absolutely. I mean, telemedicine is one of the options. We saw the president in his executive order for Medicare Advantage just a few weeks ago put that in his executive order to not only help bring down costs, but also it's an incredible time-saving feature. I mean, if you've got the opportunity to call, text, or do telemedicine with your doctor on a specific issue, if you're working, in my case, if you're a single mom working, you don't have time to go sit for 2 hours in a waiting room for something that could be handled over, technology. And so injecting some of that kind of technology will certainly bring down costs and save time, and that's an important feature. And again, continue increasing choices. Another thing to look at in Obamacare is Obamacare has literally reduced choice. I mean, 50% of patients that are in the Obamacare markets now have 2 or less choices in insurance plans, and 1 in 5 only have one single choice. So we continue to see costs skyrocket. I mean, for family plans, it's more than double in just the few years that Obamacare has been implemented.
Unbelievable. So number 3 is lowering drug prices. We're with Job Creators Network Foundation President Elaine Parker rolling out today the organization's new Healthcare for You Healthcare Reform Playbook. And you can get more information. Go to healthcareforyou.com. And the Job Creators Network Foundation hoping to turn this into legislation on the Hill. Lowering drug prices. How do you do that?
Look, this is a complicated area, but basically we need to return the savings back to patients instead of the middleman. These pharmacy benefit managers are our middleman, and they are getting $250 billion a year that goes to these folks. And you can look at all of the recent price increases in drugs can be chalked up to rising rebates that go to middlemen instead of back to the patients. And we need to repeal the legislation that exempts these middlemen from penalty for violating federal anti-kickback laws. And this $250 billion per year savings will significantly lower the cost of prescription drugs and medical devices that patients need. And we need Washington to take a stand on this.
So if you do that, you think health prices will come down, and that would by just taking the middlemen out, because, I mean, I kind of get that, and a lot of, I think Amazon just launched something, Pharmacy Today or something, where you can get your prescription filled through Amazon through their own pharmacy that they own, and just get it shipped to you directly, cutting a lot of people out. So I'll have to see how that plays out. Number 4, you've got creating personal health management accounts to give patients control over their health care dollars. What's that about?
So personal health management accounts are similar to the health savings accounts that we're already familiar with. But what it allows patients to do is pay for insurance premiums with pre-tax dollars so that they can purchase insurance that's actually independent from their jobs.
Right.
So it kind of eliminates the job lock of I can't leave this job because I can't lose my benefits problem that a lot of people run into. Mm-hmm. Now, in this case, employers can actually opt in to contribute directly to these accounts and get themselves out of actually providing health insurance if they choose to do so. It's an option to fund these accounts And it allows employees, it puts healthcare decisions in the hands of their employees and not the employers and not third-party administrators. And so what happens is the same tax benefits that are enjoyed by employers will now be enjoyed by all Americans because they'll be using tax-free dollars. And here's the great thing. They only use the dollars that they need for their own health care, and what they don't use goes back into their account for future use.
So you put the money in, it's tax-free. I mean, this isn't something new. You put the money in, it's tax-free, and if you don't use it, it just stays there. This has been batted around for a long time. There's absolutely no downside to this, as far as I can see. So
there's none. And under Obamacare, the limitations of what you could contribute and the restrictions were significantly increased. The president has passed an executive order to loosen some of those restrictions, but we really need to severely loosen them and increase the contribution limits so that employers can get out of the business of providing health insurance, so that employees can own their own insurance policy, and it will increase the ability again for them to be able to buy policies across state lines, and they'll be able to use tax-free dollars to do so. And so when you, John, decide to make a change in your job, or Betty Smith down the street decides to change jobs, she owns her own insurance policy and she takes it with her. She doesn't have a lapse in coverage, so there's no issue if there's a pre-existing condition that comes up because she's not had any lapse in coverage at all.
So you own your own policy, like a life insurance policy, right? Same thing, or a car insurance.
Yeah.
You change jobs or employers or whatever. You just own it, right? So you just take it with you, regardless of what you try to do. Okay, I like that. Expanding direct medical care to increase choices and lower costs. Explain that one.
So direct medical care or direct primary care. For family care needs, direct medical care is known as direct primary care, which offers families all their primary medical needs for one low monthly membership fee. There's no insurance, no middleman necessary. So obviously it puts patients and doctors back at the center of making decisions for patients. It allows patients to get regular access to their doctors at any time through, calling or texting or telemedicine either. For other procedures, whether it's a specialist or a surgical center, direct medical care means transparent cash prices, which allows patients to price shop and lowering those prices. Mm-hmm. Now, these personal health management accounts allows patients to actually pay for those costs with their tax-free dollars. And these are doctors who have actually opted out of the insurance business. And because of that, there's no middlemen and the prices have come down. And there are several economists that actually have taken a look at this, and cash health care prices are actually 40% lower than the insurer's negotiated prices because all of the bureaucracy, all of the red tape, and all of those middlemen are gone. It's between the patient and the doctor.
I love this plan. Talk to me about pre-existing conditions.
Well, our research showed 100% absolutely we must cover pre-existing conditions. And I mentioned the personal health management accounts and employees owning their own health insurance when they change jobs, no lapse in coverage, no pre-existing conditions. That goes a long way to solving the problem of pre-existing conditions, but doesn't solve everything. I mean, it's a complicated issue, obviously, and there are certainly federal and state laws that have to be changed to make this happen. And one of the ways that we're suggesting is that we allow each of the individual states to choose a risk pool model, because there are several out there, that works for them and most importantly protects patients. But those absolutely pre-existing conditions must be protected.
What about what would the age group be for? We're going to have to extend this care in just a couple seconds. What does do you have any provisions for keeping kids on the plan up to 25 or 26, or is that just up to the individual?
So here's the interesting thing. We did this market research, and it's kind of in the weeds, but it's discrete choice modeling, and it presents a set of choices. And when we talked about where people rank that, having kids on their insurance until they're 26. Once we started talking to them about choices and pick one thing over another,
yes,
having kids on their insurance policy until they're 26 dropped off the face of the earth. I mean, it just wasn't an important feature for them. I jokingly say it's because kids coming out of college nowadays can actually get jobs, whereas when President Obama was
you know
what?
You're right. I don't mean to cut you short, Elaine, but you're right. I mean that you absolutely nailed it. Back when you had Obamacare in the middle of a recession, all the kids were living in the basement. They didn't have jobs, including one of mine, and so they had to stay on it till they were 26 because you had no choice. Now they have jobs. They got their own insurance. You nailed that one. Okay, toughest one you've got here is reforming medical malpractice insurance. Now you're getting into the swamp. You get into the money. You get into the lawyers. You get into the lobbyists. That's going to be the toughest thing to do. How do you plan to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, we have to look at reforming the laws so that doctors are not doing defensive medicine. I mean, there's billions of dollars lost every year doing that. And that's something that has been talked about year after year after year. But our research shows that Americans want this done because it is a huge, huge waste of money that goes into the system, into the delivery system of our medical needs.
Right.
And we need to take that cost out. So taking costs out of the system is what we are trying to do here.
Fantastic. I love this plan. Do you have somebody in the House to write the bill?
So the likelihood and the reality, John, in Washington, D.C., of this going through a Democratic or being taken up by a Democratic-controlled House is zero. And that's the reality. It's unfortunate because the American public clearly wants a fix to our current broken healthcare system. What we'd like to see is the Republican-controlled Senate take up a bill in 2020 that would provide a clear distinction between what the Democrats are offering in a Medicare for All type scheme or a personal health care plan that is exactly what the American people are asking for and what they want.
You should go to Senator Kennedy in Louisiana.
He's great.
Yeah.
He's great.
You're going to have to find somebody to do this, but it's a good game plan. More importantly, it does give a blueprint to go forward. And the Republicans couldn't come up with it. The Democrats couldn't come up with a plan. Nobody could come up with one except Job Creators Foundation. Elaine, thank you for being with us. Great plan. More information, go to healthcareforyou.com. There's really, you need to get this out in the media. Healthcareforyou.com. Elaine Parker, great job. Thank you. Excellent.
Thanks, John.
Jim Martin coming up, 60 plus. Keep it right here.